The fluorescent lights in conference room B buzzed with their usual monotonous hum as I walked in carrying my laptop and a folder thick with research. It was our monthly innovation meeting at Meridian Technologies, where department heads were supposed to present new ideas for improving our software solutions. I'd spent 3 weeks preparing what I believed could be a game-changing proposal. "All right, everyone, let's get started," announced Richard Crawford, our VP of Product Development, as he settled into his usual seat at the head of the conference table. Richard was 48, had been with the company for 12 years, and carried himself with the kind of confidence that came from never being challenged by anyone below his pay grade. Around the table sat the usual suspects: Jennifer from marketing, Tom from sales, Sandra from customer success, and me. Alex Martinez, senior software developer, the youngest person in the room by at least 8 years. "Tom, let's start with your Q3 performance metrics," Richard said, not bothering to look up from his phone. As Tom droned through his sales numbers, I mentally rehearsed my presentation. I discovered a gap in our market that our competitors hadn't addressed yet: a way to integrate AI-powered analytics into our existing project management platform that could revolutionize how small businesses track productivity. The research was solid, the market opportunity was massive, and I had mock-ups showing exactly how it could work. After Jennifer finished her marketing update and Sandra shared customer feedback trends, Richard finally looked in my direction. "Alex, you said you had something to present?" "Yes, I do." I opened my laptop and pulled up my presentation. "I've been researching emerging trends in business intelligence, and I think there's a significant opportunity for us to differentiate our product in the small business market." I clicked to my first slide, which showed market research data I'd compiled from industry reports and competitor analysis. Currently, our project management platform focuses primarily on task organization and team communication, but small business owners are increasingly looking for integrated solutions that can provide predictive analytics about project outcomes, resource allocation optimization, and— "Alex," Richard interrupted, holding up his hand without looking at my slides. "What exactly is your role here?" "I'm sorry?" "Your job title. What does it say on your business card?" I felt heat rising in my face as the other department heads turned to look at me. "Senior software developer." "Right. Senior software developer. Not product manager. Not vice president of strategy. Not business development director." Richard leaned back in his chair with a condescending smile. "Know your place, Alex. Stay in your lane. You're not here to innovate. You're here to execute. We have people whose job it is to identify market opportunities and develop product strategy. Your job is to write code based on specs that other people create." The silence in the room was deafening. Jennifer was staring at her notepad. Tom was suddenly very interested in his coffee cup. Sandra looked uncomfortable but said nothing. "I understand, Richard. I just thought—" "That's the problem, Alex, you thought. But thinking about business strategy isn't what we pay you to do. Stick to what you know, writing clean code and meeting deadlines." Richard turned to Jennifer without another glance at me. "Jennifer, let's talk about the campaign metrics for the Henderson account." I closed my laptop and sat through the rest of the meeting in stunned silence, my carefully prepared presentation reduced to digital waste. The research I'd done on my own time, the market analysis I'd compiled, the mock-ups I'd created, all dismissed without even a cursory look. But more than the dismissal of my work, it was the public humiliation that cut deepest. Richard hadn't just rejected my ideas. He'd made sure everyone in that room understood exactly where I stood in the company hierarchy. He'd established that I was there to serve, not to contribute strategic thinking. As the meeting wrapped up and people filed out, I remained seated, ostensibly organizing my notes but actually trying to process what had just happened. "Alex," Richard said as he gathered his materials, "no hard feelings, right? Sometimes people need to hear these things directly. It's actually helpful for your career development to understand boundaries clearly." "Of course," I managed. "Thanks for the feedback." Richard nodded with the satisfied expression of someone who believed he'd just provided valuable mentorship, then walked out, leaving me alone in the conference room. I sat there for another 5 minutes, staring at my closed laptop and thinking about the months I'd spent at Meridian Technologies. I'd joined the company 18 months earlier with genuine enthusiasm about contributing to innovative software solutions, I'd consistently exceeded my development targets, volunteered for additional projects, and had assumed that initiative and competence would be recognized and rewarded. Instead, I'd just learned that initiative was seen as overreach and competence was expected to stay within very narrow boundaries. That was the moment I decided I'd never sit in that chair again, not as the person being told to know his place anyway. That evening, I drove home to my small apartment in unusual silence. Normally, I'd listen to tech podcasts or call my girlfriend Sarah to debrief about work, but I needed quiet to think about what had happened and what I was going to do about it. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "How did the presentation go?" I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "I'll tell you about it over dinner." It was educational. That doesn't sound good. Want me to pick up wine? Definitely. As I sat at my kitchen table that night, sharing pizza and wine with Sarah while recounting the day's humiliation, I realized that Richard had inadvertently given me a gift. He actually said, "Know your place in front of everyone?" Sarah asked, her expression a mixture of sympathy and outrage. Word for word, like I was some subordinate who'd forgotten his station. "Alex, that's completely inappropriate. Have you considered talking to HR?" "And say what? That my boss told me to focus on my job responsibilities instead of trying to do other people's jobs? Technically, he's right about my role boundaries. But the way he said it, publicly humiliating you, that's not acceptable." "Maybe not. But complaining to HR won't change anything. Richard's been there for 12 years. He's not going anywhere. So what are you going to do?" I took a sip of wine and looked out the window of my apartment at the city lights below. "I'm going to prove him wrong." "What do you mean?" "Richard thinks I should know my place and stay in my lane." "Fine. I'll know my place. But my place isn't going to be in his conference room, taking orders from someone who can't be bothered to look at a presentation before dismissing it." "Alex, you're not thinking about quitting, are you?" "Not yet, but I'm thinking about building something that will make quitting irrelevant." That night, after Sarah went home, I opened my laptop and began researching something I'd never seriously considered before: how to start a technology company. The next 6 months at Meridian Technologies were the most productive and the most miserable of my career. During the day, I did exactly what Richard had told me to do. I stayed in my lane, wrote clean code, met deadlines, and kept my strategic ideas to myself. I became the model of what he apparently wanted: a developer who executed instructions without question. But at night and on weekends, I was building something that would eventually make Richard's dismissal irrelevant. The idea I'd tried to present in that conference room, AI-powered analytics for small business project management, wouldn't leave me alone. The more I researched it, the more convinced I became that there was a genuine market opportunity that existing solutions weren't addressing. Small business owners wanted more than just task tracking and team communication. They wanted predictive insights about project timelines, resource allocation recommendations, and early warning systems for projects that were likely to go over budget or behind schedule. The technology existed to provide these capabilities, but nobody had packaged it in a way that was accessible and affordable for businesses with 5 to 50 employees. I spent my evenings learning about market research, competitive analysis, and business model development, skills that my computer science degree hadn't covered, but that I needed to understand if I was going to turn my idea into a viable company. I also started networking in ways I never had before. I attended local entrepreneur meetups, joined online forums for startup founders, and began building relationships with people who'd successfully launched technology companies. "Alex, you've been working a lot of late nights lately," Sarah observed one evening as I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by printed articles about venture capital and software-as-a-service business models. "I'm trying to learn some things that might be useful for my career." "What kind of things?" I looked up from my reading. "How to build a company." Sarah set down her coffee cup and gave me her full attention. "Are you serious about starting your own business?" "I think I am." Richard was right about one thing. I'm not going to be allowed to innovate at Meridian. "But that doesn't mean I can't innovate somewhere else. What would your company do?" I explained the AI analytics concept, the market research I'd been conducting, and the technical approach I was developing. Sarah listened patiently, occasionally asking questions that forced me to clarify my thinking. "It sounds like you've really thought this through," she said when I finished. "I've been thinking about it for months. The question is whether I have the courage to actually try it. What's the worst thing that could happen? I could fail spectacularly, lose all my savings, and end up having to find another job at a company where someone like Richard gets to tell me to know my place. And what's the best thing that could happen? I could build something successful and never have to take orders from someone who doesn't respect my capabilities. Sounds like the potential upside outweighs the risk. By month 8 of my secret project development, I had a basic prototype working. It wasn't polished enough for customers, but it demonstrated the core functionality I'd envisioned. The AI component could analyze historical project data and provide reasonably accurate predictions about completion timelines and resource needs. More importantly, I'd started building relationships with potential customers. Through networking events and cold outreach, I'd identified 12 small business owners who were frustrated with existing project management solutions and interested in beta testing something new. By month 10, I'd saved $15,000 from my Meridian salary and received informal commitments from 3 angel investors who were willing to contribute seed funding if I decided to move forward. By month 12, I had working prototype, a basic business plan, and enough confidence to take the leap. On a Tuesday morning in March, I walked into Richard's office with a single sheet of paper. "Richard, I'm giving you my 2 weeks' notice." He looked up from his computer with surprise. "Alex, this is unexpected. What's prompting the change?" "I've accepted another opportunity." "Where are you going?" "I might be able to match their offer." "I'm starting my own company." Richard leaned back in his chair with an expression that was part amusement, part condescension. "Really? What kind of company?" "Software development, business intelligence solutions." "Alex, starting a company is a lot more complicated than writing code. There's market research, business development, fundraising, operations management, all the strategic work that, as we've discussed, isn't really your strength." "I appreciate the concern, Richard, but I think I'm ready for the challenge." "Well, I hope it works out for you. But Alex, if it doesn't, and statistically, most startups fail, there will always be a place for you here. Good developers are hard to find." "Thanks, Richard. That's reassuring to know." I shook his hand, cleaned out my desk, and walked out of Meridian Technologies for the last time, carrying a cardboard box of personal items and a head full of plans that Richard couldn't have imagined. The 2 weeks notice period was surreal. My coworkers were supportive but skeptical about my chances of success as an entrepreneur. Richard treated me with the kind of patronizing kindness reserved for people making decisions you're certain they'll regret. "Alex, I respect your ambition," he said during my exit interview. "But there's a big difference between having technical skills and running a successful business. Make sure you're prepared for the learning curve." "I've been preparing for over a year, Richard. But I appreciate the advice. Just remember, there's no shame in coming back if things don't work out. Sometimes people need to try entrepreneurship to appreciate the stability of employment." I nodded politely and didn't mention that I'd already incorporated my company, raised initial funding, and had signed letters of intent from potential customers. On my last day, Richard made a point of stopping by my desk as I finished packing. "Good luck out there, Alex. I hope you find what you're looking for." "Thanks, Richard. I'm pretty sure I will." As I walked to my car with my box of personal belongings, I realized that Richard's dismissal in that conference room 18 months earlier had been the catalyst for everything I'd accomplished since. His instruction to know my place had forced me to figure out where my place actually was, and it wasn't in his company, taking orders from someone who confused authority with intelligence. 3 days later, I signed the lease on a small office space and officially launched Insight Analytics, LLC. The grind was about to begin. The first year of Insight Analytics was a masterclass in controlled desperation. I'd saved enough money to survive for 6 months without income, raised $50,000 in seed funding from angel investors, and had 3 small businesses committed to beta testing my product. What I hadn't anticipated was how many 18-hour days it would take to turn a working prototype into a scalable software solution. My typical routine started at 6 a.m. with customer support emails, continued with 8 to 10 hours of software development, and ended with business development calls to potential clients on the West Coast. I was simultaneously the CEO, CTO, head of sales, customer service department, and janitor. Sarah was incredibly patient during this phase, though I could see the strain that my obsessive work schedule was putting on our relationship. Alex, you've been working 7 days a week for 4 months, she said one evening as I coded through what was supposed to be our dinner together. This isn't sustainable. I know, but we're so close to having something really polished. The beta users are giving great feedback, and I think I can have the next version ready in 6 weeks. And then what? You'll work 7 days a week marketing it? Sarah, I need to give this everything I have right now. If it succeeds, we'll have financial security and I'll have built something I own. If it fails, at least I'll know I gave it my best effort. I understand that. I just don't want you to sacrifice your health or our relationship for something that might not work out. It's going to work out. How do you know? I looked up from my laptop for the first time in an hour because Richard Crawford told me it wouldn't. By month 8, Insight Analytics had 5 paying customers and was generating $3,000 in monthly recurring revenue. By month 12, we had 15 customers and $12,000 in monthly revenue. By month 18, 32 customers and $28,000 monthly. The growth wasn't spectacular, but it was consistent and sustainable. More importantly, customer feedback was overwhelmingly positive. Small business owners were telling me that our AI-powered project insights were helping them make better decisions, avoid cost overruns, and improve their profitability. Alex, I've been using Insight Analytics for 6 months now, said Maria Santos, who owned a digital marketing agency with 12 employees. Your software predicted that the Henderson campaign was going to go over budget by 20% 3 weeks before it actually happened. That early warning gave us time to have conversations with the client and adjust the scope. It probably saved us $15,000. Stories like Maria's convinced me that we were solving a real problem with a genuinely valuable solution. By year 2, I'd hired my first employee, Jennifer Park, a talented developer who'd been laid off from a larger company and was looking for an opportunity to work on something innovative. By year 3, we had a team of 5 people and were processing over $150,000 in monthly recurring revenue. Industry publications began taking notice. Small business intelligence platform Insight Analytics raises $2 million Series A, read the headline in TechCrunch when we closed our first major funding round. The article described our growth trajectory and quoted several customers about the impact our platform was having on their business operations. We've tried every project management tool on the market, said one quoted customer. Insight Analytics is the first one that doesn't just track what we're doing, it actually helps us understand what we should be doing differently. By year 4, we were processing $500,000 in monthly recurring revenue, had 23 employees, and were expanding into adjacent markets. The company I'd started in response to Richard's dismissal had grown into a genuine success story. But the most satisfying milestone came in year 5, when we reached the point where we needed to hire experienced middle managers to help scale our operations. Alex, we need someone to head up our customer success function, Jennifer Park told me during one of our leadership team meetings. She'd been promoted to vice president of engineering and was one of my most trusted advisors. We're onboarding new clients faster than our current team can handle, and we need someone with experience managing customer relationships at scale. What kind of background should we look for? Ideally, someone who's managed customer success teams at a software company with 50 to 200 clients. Someone who understands the transition from startup to growth stage operations. Post the position and start reviewing resumes, but I want to interview the final candidates personally. Of course. 2 weeks later, Jennifer walked into my office with a stack of printed resumes. I've narrowed it down to 5 strong candidates for the customer success role, she said. They all have relevant experience and good references. I started flipping through the resumes, reading backgrounds and career progressions of people who might join our team. The 3rd resume in the stack made me stop cold. Richard Crawford. Vice President of Customer Success. Most recent position. Director of Product Development at Meridian Technologies. I stared at the resume for a long moment, reading the carefully edited description of Richard's experience and qualifications. There was no mention of his condescending management style, his resistance to innovation, or his talent for public humiliation. Just a professional summary of someone with 12 years of experience managing software products and customer relationships. Jennifer, this Richard Crawford candidate, have you spoken with him yet? I did a preliminary phone screen. He seems knowledgeable about customer success metrics and has managed teams of up to 15 people. His experience at Meridian is particularly relevant since they're in a similar market segment. What was your impression of him personally? Professional, articulate, maybe a little desperate for a new opportunity. He mentioned that Meridian had some layoffs recently and he was part of a restructuring. I set Richard's resume aside and looked at the other candidates. They were all qualified, but none had quite the same depth of experience in our industry. Schedule interviews with all 5 candidates for next week. I'll clear my calendar. Including Crawford? I looked at Richard's resume one more time, thinking about the conference room where he'd told me to know my place, and the journey that had led from that moment to this one, especially Crawford. The week of interviews arrived, and I found myself unusually nervous about seeing Richard again. It had been 5 years since I'd walked out of Meridian Technologies, and I wasn't sure how either of us would handle the role reversal that was about to occur. I scheduled Richard's interview for Friday afternoon, after I'd spoken with the other 4 candidates. I wanted to have a clear sense of our options before facing the complexity of potentially hiring my former boss. The other interviews went well. Each candidate brought relevant experience and seemed capable of growing into the role we needed to fill. But as Jennifer had noted, Richard's background was the most directly applicable to our specific challenges. Friday at 3 p.m., my assistant buzzed me on the intercom. "Alex, Richard Crawford is here for his interview. Send him in." I stood up from my desk and walked to the office door, trying to prepare mentally for a conversation I'd been imagining for 5 years but never expected to actually have. Richard walked into my office wearing a navy suit that looked expensive but not quite new, carrying a leather portfolio that showed signs of wear. He looked older than I remembered. His hair was grayer, his face showed lines that hadn't been there before, and something in his posture suggested that the confidence I remembered had been tempered by recent experience. "Alex," he said, extending his hand with a smile that seemed genuinely surprised. "I have to say, I didn't expect to see you when I applied for this position." "Hello, Richard. It's good to see you again." We shook hands, and I gestured toward the chairs in front of my desk. "Please have a seat." Richard settled into the chair and looked around my office. The floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, the awards on the wall from industry publications, the framed TechCrunch article about our Series A funding. "This is quite impressive, Alex. I have to admit, when you told me you were starting your own company, I didn't imagine it would grow to this scale." "Thank you. It's been an interesting journey. I've been following Insight Analytics in the trade publications. The growth trajectory has been remarkable." I opened Richard's resume on my desk and glanced at it briefly, though I'd already memorized every detail. "Richard, I see you left Meridian Technologies 8 months ago. How was that transition?" "Not entirely voluntary, I'm afraid. The company went through some restructuring and several management positions were eliminated." "I'm sorry to hear that. You were there for, 12 years? 13. It was difficult to leave. But honestly, Alex, it might have been the push I needed to explore new opportunities." "What kind of opportunities are you looking for?" Richard shifted in his chair, and I could see him choosing his words carefully. "I'm looking for a role where I can contribute to a growing company with innovative products. Your customer success position seems like an ideal fit for my experience managing client relationships and product development. What interests you specifically about Insight Analytics?" "The market positioning is brilliant. Small business intelligence is underserved, and you found a way to make predictive analytics accessible to companies that couldn't afford enterprise solutions. It's exactly the kind of innovation that I've always believed in supporting." The irony of that statement wasn't lost on me, though Richard seemed to have no memory of dismissing that exact market analysis 5 years earlier. "Richard, what's your management philosophy when it comes to team development and innovation?" "I believe in empowering team members to contribute their best ideas while providing clear guidance and support. The best managers create environments where people can exceed their own expectations." I leaned back in my chair, studying Richard's face as he spoke. Either he'd genuinely changed his approach to management, or he'd become very good at saying what he thought I wanted to hear. "Tell me about a time when someone on your team proposed an idea that was outside their primary role responsibilities." Richard paused for a moment, and I wondered if he was remembering the same conference room moment that I was. That's That's actually something I've thought a lot about recently. I think I wasn't always as receptive to cross-functional input as I should have been. Some of my best team members had insights about product development and market positioning that I didn't always give proper consideration. What changed your perspective on that? Experience, honestly. I've learned that innovation can come from anywhere in an organization, and limiting creative input based on job titles is a mistake that can cost companies significant opportunities. That's an interesting evolution. What would you do differently if you had the chance? Richard looked directly at me, and for the first time in the conversation, I saw something that might have been genuine regret. I would listen more and judge less. I would recognize that someone's title doesn't define the value of their ideas. And I would create more opportunities for team members to contribute strategic thinking instead of limiting them to execution roles. I made a note on his resume, not because I needed to remember his answer, but because I needed a moment to process what I was hearing. Richard, this position would report directly to me. How do you feel about that dynamic given our previous working relationship? Alex, I'd be honored to work for you. You've built something remarkable here, and I respect what you've accomplished. If there's anyone who can teach me about innovative leadership and successful company building, it's you. Even though 5 years ago you told me to know my place and stay in my lane, the question hung in the air between us. Richard's face went through several expressions: surprise, embarrassment, and what looked like shame. Alex, I owe you an apology for that. I was wrong about your capabilities, about your role in the organization, and about the way I treated you in that meeting. You had valuable insights that I should have taken seriously. What makes you say that now? Because you were right about everything. The market opportunity you identified, the product concept you wanted to develop, the strategic direction you were proposing, it's exactly what you've built here. I dismissed an idea that became the foundation for a multi-million-dollar company. Richard set his portfolio on his lap and leaned forward slightly. Alex, I know this is an unusual situation. I know I don't have any right to ask for a chance to work for the company you built. But I've learned from my mistakes, and I think I could contribute to what you're building here. I looked at Richard, really looked at him, and saw someone who seemed genuinely different from the arrogant executive who'd humiliated me in that conference room. Whether the change was real or performative, I couldn't be sure. But the humility was obvious, and the circumstances spoke for themselves. Richard, let's talk about compensation. The position offers a base salary of $85,000, plus equity participation based on company performance. Richard's eyes widened slightly. I knew from industry research that his salary at Meridian had been approximately $160,000. That works for me, he said without hesitation. You understand that's significantly less than what you were making in your previous role? Alex, I understand that this is a growth opportunity with a company that has tremendous potential. I'm more interested in being part of something innovative than I am in maximizing my short-term compensation. I closed his resume and looked at him one more time. Richard, I'll be making my decision by early next week. You'll hear from me either way. Thank you for considering me, Alex. I know this must be a strange situation for you. It's definitely that. We shook hands again, and I watched Richard leave my office, walking past the reception area where my company logo was prominently displayed. The logo of the business that had grown from the idea he'd dismissed without consideration. After Richard left, I sat in my office for an hour, staring out at the city and thinking about the conversation I'd just had. 5 years ago, Richard had told me to know my place. Now he was asking me to let him know his place. As my employee, the symmetry was almost too perfect to be real. That weekend, I discussed the situation with Sarah over dinner at our favorite restaurant. We'd gotten married 2 years earlier, and she'd been with me through every phase of building Insight Analytics. So your old boss is asking you for a job, she said, trying not to smile. My old boss, who told me to know my place, is asking me to give him a place. How do you feel about that? Honestly, it's surreal. 5 years ago, I was sitting in his conference room feeling humiliated and angry. Now he's sitting in my office talking about how he's learned from his mistakes. Do you believe he's actually changed? I'm not sure. People can change. But it's also possible he's just saying what he thinks I want to hear because he needs a job. What does your gut tell you? I thought about Richard's demeanor during the interview, the way he'd acknowledged his past mistakes, the humility in his voice when he'd apologized for dismissing my ideas. My gut tells me that losing his job was probably a wake-up call. When you spend 13 years at one company and then get restructured out, it forces you to reevaluate some assumptions about your own indispensability. Are you going to hire him? I think I am. Jennifer says he's the most qualified candidate for the role, and despite our history, I think he could actually contribute to what we're building. Plus, there's probably some satisfaction in having him report to you. I smiled. I'd be lying if I said that wasn't part of the appeal. Monday morning, I called Jennifer into my office. I've decided to offer the customer success position to Richard Crawford. Really? I thought there might be some awkwardness given your previous working relationship. There definitely will be, but he's the most qualified candidate, and I think he's genuinely motivated to do good work here. What are the terms? Base salary of $85,000, standard equity package, and a clear understanding that he reports directly to me. Alex, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Is this decision based on his qualifications, or are you hiring him because you want to prove a point? I considered Jennifer's question carefully. She'd been with me since the early days of the company and had earned the right to challenge my thinking. Both, honestly. He's the best candidate for the role. But yes, there's definitely some personal satisfaction in the role reversal. I think I've earned that. As long as you're clear about your motivations. Hiring someone to prove a point can backfire if they're not actually the right fit for the job. I understand. But Jennifer, I think Richard could genuinely contribute here. And if he can't, we'll deal with that when it happens. Fair enough. Should I call him with the offer? No, I'll call him myself. I want to have that conversation directly. That afternoon, I dialed Richard's phone number from his resume. Richard, it's Alex Martinez from Insight Analytics. Alex, thank you for calling. I've been hoping to hear from you. I'd like to offer you the customer success manager position we discussed. The terms are exactly what we talked about. $85,000 base salary, equity participation, reporting directly to me. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Alex, I accept. Thank you for this opportunity. Richard, I want to be clear about something. This is a fresh start for both of us, but I expect the same level of professionalism and performance that I'd expect from any employee. Of course, you won't have any issues with me, Alex. I'm grateful for the chance to be part of what you've built. Good. Can you start Monday? I'll be there. Richard's first day at Insight Analytics was as strange as I'd anticipated. I watched him walk into our office building, the same building where I'd started the company 5 years earlier, carrying a briefcase and wearing a suit that was professional but not quite as expensive as the ones he'd worn at Meridian. I introduced him to the team at our Monday morning meeting. Everyone, I'd like you to meet Richard Crawford, our new customer success manager. Richard brings extensive experience managing client relationships in the software industry, and he'll be working to ensure our customers are getting maximum value from our platform. Richard smiled and nodded at the team. I'm excited to be here and looking forward to working with all of you. After the meeting, I walked Richard to his office, a modest space with a window but nothing approaching the executive suite he'd occupied at Meridian. This will be your workspace, I said. Jennifer will get you set up with system access and introduce you to our customer success protocols. It's perfect, Alex. Thank you. Richard, we have a team meeting every Wednesday at 2 p.m. where department heads present updates on their areas. You'll be expected to participate once you've had a chance to familiarize yourself with our client base. Understood. As I prepared to leave him to get settled, Richard looked up from his new desk. Alex, can I say something? Sure. I know this situation is unusual, and I want you to know that I don't take this opportunity for granted. You could have chosen not to hire me, and I appreciate that you're giving me a chance to contribute to your company. Richard, you're here because you're qualified for the role. Just focus on doing good work, and we'll both be fine. I will. Over the following weeks, I watched Richard adapt to his new environment. He arrived early, stayed late, and threw himself into understanding our customer base with the kind of intensity I remembered from my own early days at the company. More importantly, His interactions with the team were completely different from the authoritarian style I remembered from Meridian. He asked questions instead of giving orders, solicited input from junior team members, and consistently credited others for good ideas. Alex, I have to say, Richard has been great to work with, Jennifer told me during one of our weekly one-on-ones. He's collaborative, he listens to feedback, and he's already identified several opportunities to improve our customer onboarding process. What kind of opportunities? He noticed that we're losing some customers during their first 60 days because they're not seeing value quickly enough. He's proposed a more structured approach to early-stage customer success that could significantly improve retention. That sounds valuable. What's his proposal? Dedicated onboarding specialists, better tracking of early usage patterns, and proactive outreach to customers who aren't engaging with key features. Implement it. If Richard's ideas improve customer retention, that's good for everyone. 3 months into Richard's tenure, our customer churn rate had dropped by 15%, and several clients had specifically mentioned the improved support they were receiving. Mr. Martinez, this is Carol Stevens from Peterson Industries. Read one email I received. I wanted to let you know how impressed we've been with Richard Crawford's customer success work. He's helped us optimize our use of insight analytics in ways that have had a real impact on our project management efficiency.